on day 2, looking at the RPM manual, and I'm starting from the back. And one of the things is the 4 ways to succeed with RPM. And there's basically 4 major parts to an RPM that you really need to understand. In order for you to do well, you've got to get how the system of thinking really works. And it goes from big picture to small, manageable pieces. Think of how do I eat an elephant, right? So what we want to do is we want to have categories of improvement, and those are your highest level ideas. So think about the wheel of life, and depending on whose system you use, there tends to be health and wealth and business, family. Those tend to be the core. And then the coaching that I'm a part of adds in faith and friends and fun. So you might want to consider that. But your categories are areas of your life where you know you're always going to want to make them better, right? And it's basically every area of your life, because if you're not growing, you're dying. And so what you want to do is identify the categories that matter to you. Now, Tony says you can have a bunch that are business and a bunch that are personal, or you can combine them, however your life tends to work. But you need to know what your categories are, and you need to get associated with them, because when you know your categories, when they mean something to you, that adds a whole nother layer and level of why it's important to accomplish the things that you're trying to accomplish. So got to know your categories of improvement, and they kind of sit at the top as like, now I've got the system of thinking that says, when I need to do something, or I want to buy a product, or something's going on, I'll say, where does this fit in my categories? Is this like new stuff that I'm taking on, or is it part of the trajectory of the life that I'm trying to lead? So when you know your categories, then you've got to break them down into more manageable pieces, right? So I have 8 categories. And then I have projects within each of the categories. So I'm breaking it down into smaller parts. Now, a project is simply a container for all the elements of a project that you're working on. And a project is something big, okay? And I'm going to contrast it here. There's an action and there's a project, okay? Project is much, much bigger than an action. An action is a one and done. You write it out, you check it off when it's done. A project is multi-layer. It can take a really long time. It can take a short time too, but it's complicated. Let's put it that way, okay? And it in between the project and the action, there is something known as a block, okay? So 4 things that I just told you. There's high-level categories, then we break it into projects. We can break the projects further into blocks, and we can have the actions in each block or project or category even that help define what it is we're trying to do for that area of our life. And what you want to know is what's important to you. Not only what are your categories, but what are your projects within those categories? And at first it might seem overwhelming. If you're like me, I'm an idea person. I have a lot of projects going on. Drives my husband crazy, by the way. But it's important, because if you have a lot of things going on, then you need a place to store all of the information. So what I recommend is you spend some time getting really clear on categories and projects, then building underneath there blocks and actions. So, and it's easy. The actions will come first, because like when you're thinking of a project, you're like, here's all the things that I think I need to do for this project. Well, then as you're building your days and your weeks and your months, you start pulling actions over, and you're like, okay, in order to do this, I also need to do this. And I can't really reach this outcome unless I complete all 3 of these actions. And that's what builds a block. and you're working towards the outcome, not necessarily doing the actions. And I know that the first 20 times I heard that, I didn't quite understand what it is. So if you have that same question, I would love it if you put it in your words into the comments so that we can start to process what's holding you back on what RPM is about. Because if you don't understand it at a basic framework level, it's kind of like if you were going to build a house. You can't do it if you don't have the blueprints for how the house is supposed to look. So those categories become your blueprint. And then the projects become like the requirements that you want to have in your house. Like I want a bedroom and I want a living room and I want a pool and I want a killer kitchen. All of those things are become like your projects. And then we'll go tomorrow. I'll break down more for you on the difference between a block and a project. But right now, let's get your projects down. And as you think of actions, I want you to load them in. Now, you may not have the software. So when I say load them in, hey, I'm sure you got some paper and pencil. You have a computer or even on your phone. You could start creating a spreadsheet where you kept track of what your categories were and what the projects were within each of those categories. That would work. You know, what's interesting is when I was first introduced to RPM, I really struggled with why should I do it this way? I wanted to create a new system, a way that it would work for me. And I did. I went through and I massaged it and I would do this better and I would do this way differently. And this is how it would work for me. And over the years, what I have noticed is it would have been better, obviously, if I had just followed Tony's framework right from the beginning. But that was part of the process within me that made it work for me, was that I kept massaging it. I kept working with it so that I could learn it at a deeper level. And you may need that too. I do recommend taking the easier route and just doing the RPM the way he suggested. But if it doesn't work for you, or there's some part of it that doesn't work for you, explore that, because you might end up coming full circle, going back to using RPM, but now you'll be convicted in why it's okay. And I want that for you, because RPM is an amazing tool. As Tony Robbins likes to say, he thinks this is his greatest gift to the world. And I don't want you to miss out on getting your gift, because, wow, how blessed are we to have people who can come up with systems that can change the trajectory of your world. All right. Hope you like this video. If you do, please put it in the comments, any insights you had. I will respond to questions and thought processes that would move us along a little bit faster. So I don't want you to get stuck, okay? Take care. See you tomorrow. This is my 7-day challenge.